Are you tired of the hassle that comes with using gimbals? Do you want to get better handheld footage from a camera like this, or even a cinema camera? Well, I got a few tips for you. Let's talk about it. So my original plan for this video was to go out and get some cool B-roll out in like some forest or national park or a lake or wherever here in Utah, but due to the rising cases of COVID-19, I decided to stay home, kind of do my part to kind of help stop the spread and utilize my dog and have him be my subject for this B-roll, so I hope you enjoy. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to NBC Arts. On this channel we talk about filmmaking gear, tips, and tutorials, and today we are talking about how to get better handheld footage. Now, stabilizing footage has kind of been part of my process since I first started filmmaking, okay? But when I first started, everybody was using glide cams, and then the handheld gimbal craze kind of started, and here we are today with all these crazy cool handheld gimbals that can now hold huge cinema cameras like the C200 or even bigger. When the Ronin S came out, I decided to buy a gimbal. I didn't end up going with the Ronin S. I went with the Zion Crane 2, and that has been my gimbal ever since. But as time's gone on, it's been collecting dust more and more. Now, this is no fault to the gimbal at all. It's a great piece of equipment. I've had no issues with it whatsoever, and it's been a tried and true solid piece of equipment since day one. But it has been sitting in my closet more and more as of recently. Ever since I decided to step up to a cinema camera and I got the C200, my gimbal is just kind of sat in the closet because my C200 physically can't fit on there. I know it can with some counterweights and kind of like jerry-rigging it on there, and like it's not like the payload of the camera itself is too much for the gimbal, but it's just the physical size doesn't really work well for that style of gimbal. And I'm not one of those people that's gonna go out and buy a Ronin 2 just to stabilize my Canon C200. So once I stepped up to the C200, I kind of started looking into how to get better handheld shots. And that's where today's topic came from. I wanted to kind of show you guys how I get handheld shots and how you guys can get better handheld shots if you're finding your footage a little bit shaky. Now, just to preface, you cannot get gimbal-like movements from using handheld unless you're like some genius when it comes to doing handheld. But there are things you can do to smooth out your footage a little bit more and get rid of those micro jitters, get rid of some of the shaky cam footage, and kind of make it a little bit more stable without having to involve another piece of equipment like a gimbal. So my first piece of advice today is to add weight to your camera. Cameras today seem to be getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. Thanks, Sony. While this form factor is really great for travel and for kind of taking around with you, and it doesn't take up a whole lot or ruin your bag, and it's nice and lightweight for when you're going on long trips, it does kind of present some issues when going handheld. Now, this camera, there's nothing wrong with this form factor, but it is generally made for photography and not really, doesn't have like the filmmaker in mind when going with a camera that has this type of form factor. So one thing that we can do to kind of combat this is to rig it out with a cage and a V-mount battery, some rods, a matte box, whatever, and kind of make it bigger so that you can have more points of contact when holding this camera. You can kind of get your hands away from the body of the camera, because that will solve a lot of those micro jitter issues. Now, I'm not personally one that likes cages on smaller cameras like this. I ran with a small A6500 for a long time in a cage in a video setup, and it just didn't really work because then I'd have to take it out of the cage in order to do like photos and stuff, and it was just whatever. So that's when I decided to step up to a Canon C200, which was a much larger form factor and much more ergonomic for video shooters. But not everybody has the budget to kind of step up to a cinema camera, so rigging one of these out in a cage is really great. I'm not going to be showing that today because I haven't really bought a cage for this camera, because I haven't really seen a need to do that yet, but I do have a cage for my Canon C200, so that I can have more mounting points for other accessories like monitors and other things on the camera. So the reason why we want to add weight to our cameras is so that we have to use more effort to hold the camera steady. With this, you really don't have to have a whole lot of effort to hold this camera up. It's nice and lightweight, especially with this lens and camera combination. But with a heavier setup, you are going to have to use more of that muscle power to kind of keep the camera steady. Plus, adding more things to your camera gives you more points of contact on the camera, which we will talk about in just a second. So if you already own a camera and you don't have the budget to kind of step up to a cinema camera level, or if you just really don't want to kind of rig your camera out and kind of have all those different accessories in the bulk, because it does add a lot of clutter sometimes, especially if you get addicted to cages like me. But don't worry, there's a couple things you can do to help stabilize your image without having to spend all that money. This brings me to my second point: IBIS and optical image stabilization lenses. Most cameras today come with some form of image stabilization built into the camera. Even the newer cinema cameras are starting to come out with that kind of stuff, including this EOS RP. Now, while this does not have IBIS, which is in-body image stabilization, where the physical sensor moves within the body, it does have digital image stabilization. It doesn't work as well as IBIS, and some IBIS systems are better than others. Like Panasonic systems are amazing. I've seen people get super buttery handheld footage with just a small camera and a tiny lens, and I was like, my mind was blown. But as IBIS systems keep improving, no matter what brand you go with, I think you're gonna be kind of happy. The second thing you can use in conjunction with IBIS or digital image stabilization is getting a lens that has optical stabilization. One of which is the Sigma 70-200 sport lens that has optical stabilization built in. Now, like I said before, I really don't have a gimbal that can kind of stabilize my Canon C200, and being a one-man band kind of crew, the less equipment that I have to bring with me and keep track of, the better. So I figured getting a optical stabilized lens such as this will definitely help smooth out my handheld shots. And my final tip for getting better handheld shots, we kind of mentioned this before, is points of contact on the camera. This is where rigging a camera can kind of help you out, and having a bigger camera can definitely help you out. Now, shooting with the Canon C200 over the past year or so has taught me a lot about handheld and kind of how to hold the camera and get the best results, at least for me. My first instinct when I got it was to kind of hold it out here like this, you know, with like my camera was, and just kind of hold it out, lock my elbows in and whatever, and just kind of hold it like that and hope for the best. Well, my arms got really tired after a while because it is a heavier camera, and I didn't really, and coming from a smaller camera like the A6500 to this camera was kind of a big change for me. Then once I started rigging it out with a V-mount battery and monitors and bigger lenses with a matte box and everything like that, just holding it straight out like this wasn't super practical for me anymore. Now, kind of watching other people how they use their cameras handheld, and kind of watching other C200 users and kind of learning from them, I kind of figured out that you need to like not just hold it out like this and lock your elbows in, but more like cradle it like a baby. And so what I've done now is I've kind of developed a technique where I kind of lock the camera into my shoulder, and then I have my hand on the side grip, and then I bought a 15mm rod handle to kind of put on the bottom of my 15mm rails to kind of hold it like a flamethrower almost, and kind of keep it steady just like that. Doing it this way gives me about 5 points of contact, 4 to 5 points of contact. So one of them comes with me holding the side grip, the other one comes from me holding the 50mm rod handle underneath the camera, the other one comes from me tucking it into my shoulder, and then I can kind of press it up against my body and kind of hold it a little bit steady. Now, to wrap up this video, I'm not saying that gimbals are bad and that you should go throw yours away or you should just disregard them entirely. I think gimbals are great, and they can definitely be a helpful tool in the right situation. And what I'm really trying to say is that you shouldn't disregard handheld footage in favor of gimbals, because sometimes having handheld footage can kind of give you an energy to the shot that you may not have gotten with a gimbal. Well guys, that is about it for me. If you like this video, leave a like and a comment down below. If you want to see more from me, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring that bell for notifications so you don't miss a single video I produce. And as always, I will see everybody in the next video. See you later.